All right, good evening, class of COVID-19. So today we're going to be going over euthanasia, and hopefully I'm trying something different here. Going to be doing like a screen sharing thing. Hopefully it works out. So let's get it moving. Okay, so let's see. All right, so we've got this PowerPoint is on euthanasia and assisted suicide. And I know we can't really spend a whole bunch of time going through this, so hopefully, I'll give you the basics, and I definitely look forward to our class time discussing, or our Zoom class time discussing some applications of this. So the objective is to understand what euthanasia is and the different kinds, and familiarize ourselves with the arguments for it and against it. All right, so euthanasia. It's an action or an omission which of itself or by intention causes death in order that all suffering may in this way be eliminated. So the EU part means good or well, and the euthanasia means death. Now, before we go any further into this, I want to stress that euthanasia, it's an issue that I think is similar to abortion in that it's a very personal, very serious and complex issue. And so it's extremely important that, like, if you're actually having a conversation with someone about euthanasia, that you remember to be very loving and compassionate, because hopefully you haven't, but if you have seen someone, like a loved one, kind of slowly die, like if I remember my the last grandparent I had, my grandpa on my mother's side, he kind of just declined over, I guess, 1 year, 6-month period, or just steady downfall. By the time, it's very painful to see. It's like once his appetite vanished, when that happened, you would only see like flashes of his former self. Those last couple of weeks, they were definitely the worst. The flashes of their former selves would became very rare. In the final few days, it's nearly impossible to tell if he knew we were there, or if he cared that we were. It wasn't like he could actually like smile or hug anyone. So it's definitely a painful thing, and I think that's probably one of the most important things to keep in mind when talking about this issue. Because in the classroom, it's it might be easy to speak forcefully about it one way or the other, but in a real life situation, it's unpleasant. Sorry about this. So to give you a little backstory, and this is it's so inappropriate for me to have done this for this slide, but that's just kind of how it worked out. I wasn't planning on it. I remember during the, I think it was during the senior retreat last year, Noel he said something to me. I can't remember what it was, but I just told him, all right, I'm going to get back at you. And he was a big Bengals fan, so I made this. The next PowerPoint I made from that moment on was this one, and I just input like a bunch of images of of Bengals fans and stuff. Again, yeah, it's very inappropriate, and I apologize for that. I didn't take the time to change it. Maybe I should do that over our summer break. But yeah, I apologize for the inappropriateness for this slide or this PowerPoint, this subject. So, okay, we've got 6 different kinds of euthanasia. And there's 2 different branches. So the 2 different branches are active euthanasia and passive euthanasia. And within each branch, you have voluntary active euthanasia, non-voluntary active euthanasia, and involuntary active euthanasia. Then it's going to be voluntary passive, non-voluntary passive, and involuntary passive. So we're going to go through what each of these mean. All right, now, so for active euthanasia, this is someone intentionally choosing to kill a person by an act of commission. Now, commission is like it says in the dictionary, it's an instruction or command or duty given to a person or group of people. In other words, like you're doing something to end this person's life. And it's also referred to as direct or positive euthanasia. That positive is just simply meant to mean like you're doing something. You're not just, it's not like you're not acting. That would be the passive, but you're actively doing something. So voluntary active euthanasia. This is when it is performed on persons who give free and informed consent to being killed mercifully. So let's say somebody was in a horrific accident and they said, you know, if I'm paralyzed, I don't want to live. Like they're giving full consent. They know what they're saying. And then they are killed mercifully. Non-voluntary. When performed on individuals who are not capable of giving free and informed consent to being killed mercifully. So I would imagine that this one has to do with, or this one would come into play with someone who gets in a maybe another horrific accident, but they're unconscious, and they've never said anything. They've never haven't even told any family members that, you know, I don't want to live like this. So you don't know. And then, so they don't have, it's not like they're going against someone's wishes, because they simply don't know their wishes. They don't know what they want because they can't, they're not capable of giving it. And then you've got the involuntary. This is done, or when done to individuals who refuse to give free and informed consent to being killed mercifully, but who nonetheless are so killed. All right, now there is currently, at least as of last year, there was a push to legalize active voluntary euthanasia. And that's actually already been legalized in more than a few places, including Oregon. And I honestly, I have not come across anyone who actually supports, even in theory, or at least in theory, involuntary euthanasia. Like if someone's saying, hey, if this happens, I don't want you to pull the plug. Like I want to continue living, and then someone just completely disregarding that and doing it anyway. Like I don't know of anyone, or I haven't encountered that like in any of my reading or podcasts or anything like that. Okay, now on to passive euthanasia, also called indirect or negative euthanasia. So it is when someone brings about the death of a person for merciful reasons by an act of omission, that is, by withholding or withdrawing medical treatments that could preserve that person's life precisely in order to bring death about. Okay, so get back to somebody who had a terrible accident. It's like, okay, we could do this, this procedure, and it's at the very least, it's going to preserve that person's life for a certain amount of time. Then choose not to do it. Okay, so it's not like you're taking away the thing that could preserve that person's life. So, I mean, omission is something neglected or left undone, or apathy toward, or neglect of duty. All right, so for passive euthanasia, you got voluntary, when the person killed gives free and informed consent to the withholding or withdrawing of treatments precisely as a way to bring about his or her own death. Next, we've got non-voluntary, when the person so killed is incompetent and incapable of giving consent. So it's a mirror image, really. It's like the photo-negative image of active. Then involuntary, when the person so killed refuses to give consent to the withholding or withdrawing of life-preserving treatment. Now, ideally, I would have you divide into groups and come up with scenarios for each, but since we're not actually in school, not going to do that. All right, so active and inactive euthanasia, they're morally the same. Each is the intentional killing of an innocent human being or human person for reasons of mercy. Now, note that this is, at least with inactive, euthanasia, this is completely different from the choice to withhold or withdraw medical treatments from a person because the treatments in question are either useless or burdensome, and realizing the person will die without such treatments. So we're going to return to that later. FYI. Man, I'm gonna have to shave some mustache hairs. I think are tickling my nose. By the way, some of your beards look hideous. Just want to say that. Some look good though. All right. So these are the main arguments for euthanasia. The principle of autonomy. That's the first one. Second one is personal life versus biological life. And third one is the quality of life. So with this first one, what does autonomy mean? Well, here it means that their freedom of self-determination includes the freedom to choose to be killed when doing so is judged reasonable, on the grounds that they are better off dead than alive, that their lives are not long, their lives are no longer of any value to them, and that others have the duty to respect their choice to be killed mercifully rather than bear the dignity of a life no longer worth living. And by the way, this is a lot of this stuff is from this book, Catholic Bioethics and the Gift of Human Life, written by William E. May. And also this would definitely apply for voluntary active euthanasia. That first one, principle of autonomy. Second, this personal life versus biological life. This is basically the same argument that's applied for supporting abortion, saying that, can't say the fetus is a person. It can't reason, it can't speak, it doesn't really know what's going on. And quality of life argument, I mean, that's basically as it sounds regarding the quality of that person's life. Okay, so this is regarding the principle of autonomy. Respect for this person's integrity and autonomy require one to honor his or her request to die. In fact, not to do so is not only to fail to respect the person's autonomy and dignity, it is to compel him or her to live in a way he or she believes is a horrible mockery of all that he or she holds dear, and to force him or her to die a miserable, pain-ridden death. Thus, carrying it out is, in fact, an act of kindness. Death control, like birth control, is a matter of human dignity. Without it, persons become puppets. So that's from an article, or maybe it's a book by a guy named Fletcher, or a gal named Fletcher, who knows, or I don't know, called The Patient's Right to Die. So first of all, for these, like we're talking about instances where the patient in question has given free and informed consent. And also, due to the amount of pain and or suffering experienced, they hold that they are better off dead and alive. And pain relievers are not doing the trick. So it's like, we can't really do anything to ease this person's pain, their misery, other than kill them. So this view holds that it's an infringement on one's liberty to not let them be euthanized. In some, voluntary active euthanasia is justified, like this is the argument, is justified on account of a person's right to be in control of his or her own life or death. Now, if we would have covered abortion, but I know that normally I would do that, but the lady doing the right to life stuff is knocking that out of the park, so we don't really need to go over it. Anyway, we would have looked at the basics of this when discussing abortion. So if one does not have any exercisable cognitive functions, they would say that one is not a person, so it's no different from killing an animal. And Peter Singer is one of the few people who actually follow out the logical consequences of that argument by saying, like, it's okay to kill a kid who's a year old, because really there's not much exercisable cognitive functions at a year old or 6 months. I don't know the exact date. But I mean, based on that argument, that's exactly what it allows for. Okay, so a person's circumstances, this is quality of life. A person's circumstances are so bad that death is a benefit and not a harm. And a person's life is judged to be no longer worth living. So killing that person is seen as an act of benevolence. This argument is typically used with non-voluntary euthanasia, but can be used with active voluntary euthanasia. I don't know if you've ever seen the movie Me Before You, but it's a great example of this, which is probably why I don't like it so much. Next slide. All right, now we're going to get it to benemortasia. So bene means good or happy. Mortasia means death. It's coined by a guy named Arthur Dick, who is a professor at Harvard, or at least he was during the 90s when this book was written. I think actually this book was written later. I think it was in the 2000s. Yeah. Copyright 2000 and 2008. So yeah. And there's a similar term called agathanasia. So if you know the name Agatha, it's just Agatha, then adding on nasia, and it means the same thing. Agatha is the Greek word for good, or one of the Greek words for good. Okay, so based on the following truths, this is for benemortasia, it is always wrong and utterly incompatible with love for God and neighbor, intentionally to kill innocent human life. In caring for the dying, a proper love for life requires one to make use of ordinary and proportionate means of of preserving life, but one is free to withhold or withdraw extraordinary or disproportionate means of doing so. Now that's basically the church's teaching on it. I think I get more into that in the later slides, so I'm just going to continue on. Yeah, I really this payback for Noel should have been a different topic, because it's terrible. So why is it wrong to hasten one's own death? The Christian response is that one's stewardship of one's life does not include the choice to terminate the stewardship itself. We did not ourselves participate in initiating the gift and task of that stewardship. We cannot accept it on conditions chosen by us. Why God should have brought us or anyone into existence as persons created for their own sake is deeply mysterious. So we should not be particularly surprised if we also find it mysterious that God sees meaning and value in every part, even the most miserable and reduced, of the lifespan he allots us. But that God can and does is central to the faith of Israel and to Christian faith. So that's looks like that's from an article, maybe a journal entry about euthanasia from the clinical practice in the law. So I brought up, so now we're getting to my own input on this stuff. I brought up my great uncle passing away in a previous lecture. I meant to just bring it up here, but I guess something reminded me of it that I was reading then. So he was definitely both like an uncle and grandparent to me. He was kind of the last one left from that generation in my family. I remember him saying on occasion, excuse me, remember him saying on occasion, or on one occasion, I just wish they'd let me die. It caught me off guard. I didn't really say anything when I heard it. But afterwards, reflecting on it, I told myself that if he ever said that, at least in my presence again, I was going to speak up. And here's why. I thought about his wife, and I thought about his kids. And if I were married and my wife said something like that around me, I would ask her if my love doesn't mean anything, or her love for me doesn't mean anything. If she really believed that, though she was incapable of living in the manner that she was accustomed to, could she not still love me? Could I not still love her? Like, is that worth it? So that's really on a more very personal note, a very personal argument. It's not really meant to be used in like an academic debate or anything like that. But just personally, I think that's probably what I would say. Now, I want to bring up your favorite, I'm sure, Heidegger's thought on modern technology here, because it's very relevant, I think. And by the way, while I did come up with this myself through discursive thought and reflection, and speculation, I actually have had a few conversations with people knowledgeable in this area, and they said that they agree with me and they think I'm correct. So here we go. If it's true that we view all things as resources, so remember that's what Heidegger said, that's the ontological standing or status of beings under the reign of modern technology, that everything is seen to be a mere resource. So if we view things in terms or if we view all things as resources, that would mean that to some extent we view ourselves as resources. If we view things in terms of production and consumption, then we would view ourselves to some extent in terms of production and consumption. Now, this view I'm talking about is not something theoretical or, yeah, theoretical. It's very concrete, in my opinion, which others in the field of taking care of the elderly have agreed with. It is responsible for comments along the lines of what I heard my great uncle say. Like, if you understand yourself fundamentally in terms of production and consumption, if you understand yourself as a resource, then of course you would see no value in your life if you were old and dying. You would see yourself like as a drain on the economy, or a drain on your kids' wealth. You would see yourself, yeah, just as you wouldn't see yourself in terms of like a wealth of wisdom that you could share with people, or a person capable of loving. And so I think here is another reason why we went in depth on that chapter of my thesis about Heidegger's understanding of modern technologies, because it really does apply to, or it helps us understand better, I think, a lot of the issues that we face, a lot of the social issues that we face, that the church is more vocal about, like euthanasia, like contraception, like abortion. And so, yeah, that I think wraps it up. Just want to make sure. Okay, there's one thing that I didn't mention. So you see here, number 2, in care for the dying, a proper love for life requires one to make use of ordinary or proportionate means of preserving life, but one is free to withhold or withdraw extraordinary or disproportionate means of doing so. Now, stop sharing and I gotta pull something up. I should have had this ready. Sorry about that. Because I want to watch a clip from Breaking Bad, because really what this is saying is, like, okay, if you're stage 4 cancer, let's say it's a really, or it's a type of cancer that is very difficult to treat. What does the church say that, we should do? What's their teaching there? And what it is, we're obligated to provide ordinary and proportionate means of treatment. But that definitely depends on a person's state of life, on the amount of money they have. Like, if something's going to bankrupt a family, and there's like 0% chance of it working, or not even 0, maybe there's like a 1% chance or a 5% chance, like that would be considered an extraordinary means. Okay. All right, now share screen again. Okay. Yeah, because I don't know. it's quite possible that that I'm not allowed to do that. So I'm just gonna stop there. Maybe we can watch it together next week. So sorry about that. Hopefully I'll be able to learn how to like trim it out or something. But yeah, so sorry, no, that's not it. So what was I saying? Oh, we're only obligated to provide ordinary and proportionate means of care. So if something is just like has a very, very low success rate, and it's not even, there's a good chance that it's not really going to improve anything. It's not like you're obligated to do that. That would be, so we're talking here about the non-active or inactive. I can't even remember the terms anymore. All right, so I'll just stop there. If you have any questions, feel free to comment. Remember to hit that subscribe button. Oh, and a last word from our sponsors at Patches Proctology. Remember to enter that promo code, Sour Patch Kids. You get 50% off your first visit. Good evening.